So we know people everywhere are using ChatGPT. We hear stories all the time, whether it's writing essays, whether it's professionals writing emails and doing it for work. But we finally have some very interesting data on what people are actually doing behind the scenes. So this week, actually it is Monday, September 15th, and a new paper was just released from the National Bureau of Economic Research that really gives us an unprecedented look into how people are using things and how many people are doing what. Researchers analyzed a huge privacy protected data set of ChatGPT conversations to map out how this technology is being integrated into people's lives. And they did this kind of over the course of a year. So ChatGPT now has over 700 million weekly users, which they say is 10% of the world's adult population. And for people in education, the results are honestly really ones to pay attention to. So we're going to actually spend a lot of time on this and really work through the different themes.
How do you navigate change? It's a question we think about often, and one that today's world expects us to be comfortable with. The challenge, however, is where do you begin? And how do you develop the mindset and skills to be successful? You're listening to Designing Schools, and I'm your host, Dr. Sabba Quidwai, educator, researcher, and storyteller. Join me each week for stories and strategies that bridge the gap between research and practice, as together we explore how might we design schools.
So we'll start with the first one, and that's that I think so much of the conversation has been around ChatGPT and AI tools for work. Clearly, the biggest area people are interested in them is for life in general. Non-work usage grew significantly. As of June 2025, over 70% of all messages were for non-work purposes, up from 53% just a year prior. The idea that this is just like a homework machine is just not really true anymore. Students are using it for hobbies, planning social events, getting advice, exploring creative ideas, and it's AI Literacy Week. And I think this is such perfect timing for this to come out as people think about what kind of conversations they want to be having with this.
Yeah, I think it's really important. It is worth noting that the data they released is all from consumer use. So it's people with the free account, the $20 account, or the $200 account. It's not like they're enterprise users. But yeah, I think it was very significant that people were obviously using it for all these personal things. And they said that 30% is they're using their personal accounts at work, right? And it's a lot of kind of relatively simple stuff like drafting emails, communicating, expression, all these types of things. But the other thing pointed out is that the tools are like getting easier to use, right? Because obviously there has been training, right? That people have had the opportunity to have at work or they've taken an online class or something, but there's no way 700 million people have taken a course or received training on how to use any AI at all, right? So a lot of people are figuring out for themselves, but they definitely are using it this way. Though I continue to surprise people even sometimes, students or adults, when I just turn on the voice. So a lot of people are still pretty unaware that you can just talk to it through your phone or the computer. And that kind of exchange, it seems like a little weird to them. It weirds them out for lack of expression. But then if you just stop the voice and you just show that they're really just like, the text is like right there in the feed, right? So it's no different. Then they're like, oh, okay, that's fine. But that human voice really creates that connection. And that's really what all the companies are trying to do. And some people speculate, oh, Anthropic, they have a report we can talk about in a little bit. Most of their business is on the business side, right? It's more B2B. And some people say, oh, who knows? Because there's all these like people just commenting about what they think OpenAI is doing, but they clearly have more business on the consumer side, right? So they want people to have this relationship with it. I'm not saying in a bad way. Obviously that happens, but they just want it to be like something you feel comfortable talking to.
Yeah, and it's definitely working. So basically what they did is they broke it down into some of the big themes where they see people using this. So let's get into the big three themes, because I think the first one is the most relevant to education. And so they said like 80% of all conversations fell into three main categories. The first one being practical guidance. And this basically was the top category, okay, of how to advice and creative ideation. And one of the biggest areas, this is 10.2% of all conversations were in the category of tutoring or teaching. And this is just absolutely incredible. Like basically it has become a 24/7 tutor for millions of people who are basically looking for how can I learn this in a way that is personalized to me? So I feel like the education industry has talked about personalized learning for so long, and clearly this is one of the top ways in which people are looking to these tools.
Yeah, and it makes sense because it's just starting to work like a little bit like the memory, right? It remembers your conversations. And now both with OpenAI and Claude and Anthropic, you can either create like a project essentially, and that will retain the memory within that project. It can really help you. And a lot of people said it was funny when ChatGPT first came out, people were like, oh, this will enable online personalized learning. And then 3 months later, people were like, see, it doesn't do personalized learning. It's very general. And I'm like, it doesn't even have the memory and the knowledge graphs. Like the people who are saying it was going to do personalized learning, they didn't mean at the moment. They meant that was like coming into the system. So I think that's going to help a lot, right? Because it can adapt things that interest you. It'll know exactly where your level is in. I saw somebody post on LinkedIn, people don't realize how powerful these systems are going to be because they can even stay within that like Bloom's like kind of area where you're challenged, but not challenged too hard. I forget the name of it, but it's going to keep you right in that area and it can challenge you. Obviously, a teacher, they have a class, even a small class, or a teacher is going to have 12 kids. Some have 30 or more, right? So the zone of proximal development, that's what it is, right? They're not going to meet that for every student. That's impossible. But these systems are going to be able to do that and they're going to become powerful. So even though they're not there, that's going to come in an ed tech product where somebody's built that on top of it, probably. Okay. When people say, oh, it still makes mistakes, but when you're learning something on your own, you're just trying to learn generally, right? And hopefully not learning how to do heart surgery, right? You're not going to cut somebody open and make a mistake and cut the wrong artery and kill them. So there's a lot of things you can learn, and it's exciting that people are learning, right? There's this whole thing now. Everyone's a cheater, right? Okay, no, everyone's not a cheater. And maybe if they are cheating, they don't care to learn about that thing. They're just trying to get through their day, right? Like, whereas there are things that people want to learn. I laugh at that as a little bit of a tangent, but it's like, well, do you really think people have stopped learning? Even if it's the case that all these people in school are quote unquote cheating, even if that's true, that they're still learning, right? They may be learning other things than what they're supposed to have the test on, but people learn all day, every day. They just do, right? In their interactions with each other. So it's not the case that people stop learning and now they basically have a kind of a friend who knows at least a lot of stuff about basically everything. So that's pretty helpful.
So this actually brings us into the second big area that they saw a use for, and that is seeking information, which is interesting because we just had that hallucination report that just came out. But basically what they're saying is this is basically the new Google. People are not just searching for links. They're asking for direct synthesized answers. And I remember earlier reading a lot of people say, yeah, even though it could be wrong, I'd rather get the information I need and then like fact check and kind of review through that.
Yeah.
But that trend has definitely grown over time. And I don't know, I think it just really speaks to, I think, one, going back to teaching like sources and information literacy and media literacy and all these different pieces that are there. But that was the second biggest trend that they identified.
Yeah, I think that's true. I was talking to some students over the weekend and they even pointed out that like when you used to do a Google search, it was just like all this garbage and you had to like, figure out not just what was accurate or not or biased, but even just any information that was relevant to what you were trying to find. Whereas they're like now it just gives you pretty good sources and you can click on them and most of them work, right? So even if you really want something that's fact-based, but you definitely have to double check. It can do that. And I just saw, I don't know if you saw that Thinking Machines, that's like Mira Murati's new company. She's the former CTO of OpenAI. They just published a long paper. I read through it a little bit. Some of it got super technical, but their basic claim was that they think they figured out how to solve the hallucination problem. So if they figured that out, then okay, we're going to get pretty high factual accuracy like in the models through whatever the way they've done it. Most people figure this would eventually be solved. It's getting better and it's not its primary purpose. It wasn't really designed as a fact machine. Originally, the chatbots were really just designed for conversation. They got the conversation to work. That was the original goal, wasn't? Then everyone just took off in more ways than they could imagine. Facts, but with concepts and ideas, it doesn't ask you to explain some political or economic theory or whatever. It'll explain it. My friend of mine told me his air conditioning wasn't working, and he pointed out, he asked it, and he put the video on the thing, and it told him how to fix it. It's highly useful getting information and answers, and it makes sense.
All right, this brings us to the third big theme that they uncovered, and this is writing. This was pretty much the number one use case for work-related tasks, making up 40% of those messages. But here's what was really interesting. 2/3 of the writing tasks involved editing, critiquing, or summarizing text that the user had given, rather than creating new things from scratch. So this concept of AI is going to write my essay, like you're saying, the whole cheating panic isn't really that much. It's more that people are using it as a writing partner or coach. And that really, again, goes back to this concept. We have talked about this extensively, and that is not thinking about AI as a tool, but thinking about it as a teammate and really bringing it into your process. And really, this to me gives new even meaning and significance to the WISE framework and the ones that we're creating with our partners. And that is around decision making and judgment, that transparency for as you're revising, as you're brainstorming, as you're thinking about getting clarity on whatever it is you're putting in, how are you making those decisions and how are you communicating those decisions? And so I thought these three were just so interesting.
Yeah, and people also, they think. So, for example, it made me think of my college AI class. They all have to pick a tool and present about the tool and how they used it and those type of things. And someone picked Copilot, and she's, I was asking it for some feedback on my writing, and she just kind of got mad because it entirely rewrote like 2 of the paragraphs. I said, yeah, it's almost rude if you ask your friend for some feedback on your writing, give it to me, and then it is change it all. So she's like, but no, I just told it, like, I didn't want you to rewrite it. I just wanted some advice on, what I wrote. And she's kind of did that. So that shows a couple things. Like, one, she knew that, okay, you can have a conversation with it. 2, it did show you that people don't think anymore. She wasn't just, okay, I'm going to think, I'll just use it. She said, all right, but that's not really what I wanted. Yeah, I didn't want you to just rewrite everything that I did. I wanted you to give me some feedback, and I wanted to make choices. And I think everyone's always, so I make a grammar mistake. There's so many fine rules of grammar that nobody wants to make a grammar mistake, but most people's grammar is like not perfect, right? It's really only writing professors and maybe English teachers who basically write with perfect grammar, but everyone wants to, right? So why not have it fix it? And sometimes I'm using it, you write something and you're like, I just didn't really like how that sounded. So you ask it to rewrite it. So it makes a lot of sense. And I was just saying a minute ago, that's what they originally designed it for, to have this kind of natural language conversation. So it's pretty powerful in that direction. Plus, it saves a lot of time. Sometimes I'm like, I got to write this whole thing out or type it out. And I'm like, no, I'll just tell ChatGPT or whatever what I want. And it does it. So it makes a lot of sense. That's a strong use case.
Here's the one that I'm really excited for, because this is actually what the inspiration was behind the new program, the AI Power Circle. And that was, I remember a couple months ago, there was an article by the Harvard Business Review that talked about how women were using AI tools less than men because they wanted to be more careful and they were thinking through things more. And one of the biggest findings from this report is that gender gap has closed. While early adopters were definitely disproportionately male, by June 2025, weekly active users with typically feminine first names, they said, were slightly more common. AI is now a universal tool, not a niche gadget for one demographic. And I think the number was about 52% or 53% of their users were female. So I think that was a really interesting one. Another theme that came out from that was it's not just about coding. They said that there was a myth that AI chatbots are primarily for STEM and for coding, but they showed that was actually only 4.2% of conversations. The biggest impacts were more like on soft skills, like communication, writing, like we said, like information searching, synthesis. And so I just think if you're a humanities teacher, these are such important themes to know that actually I think will strengthen the way in which people engage with this work. But the overall really big thing was they said it was the rise of asking over doing. And I thought that was such an important message for educators to hear, because I think right now there's a perception that it's the opposite, that it's doing and not asking. And we want our kids to be doing more asking. So the researchers categorize messages as either asking, seeking advice for a decision, or doing, requesting a finished product. They said asking has grown faster than doing and now makes up almost half of all messages. Educators, users in professional jobs are especially more likely to use it for asking. So I think we talk so much, right, about how do we get kids to ask the right questions, which in my opinion is really truly the definition of critical thinking. What questions are you asking that are going to lead to new ideas or new insights and things along those lines? And it seems that when you teach people good decision-making habits and skills, this is really such a strong combination right now for, hey, everyone, this is what the data is telling us people are doing. Let's lean into that and lean more into decision-making, judgment, and problem solving.
Yeah, and it also just has a lot of good ideas. Most of the times when I write a lot on my Substack, so people are like, how do you write all that? So I have a conversation with ChatGPT, what I'm thinking about, and then I just get to write a draft, and then I edit it, and like I send it out. It's my ideas, but I don't write it all. But sometimes I'm like, I think I have a couple creative ideas, creative points I want to make, and I'll say, what are your ideas? And sometimes they'll just give me kind of, okay, these are like generic, but no, I want you to be really creative. I want you to think of something that other people haven't thought of or they really haven't talking about. And they'll usually give me one or two. I find it to be very helpful in that regard. And I'm glad people are like asking it, right? Instead of just getting it to reproduce what you're supposed to do. It seems everyone should be doing better work. That way they would just ask it something and just get the one answer and not do anything, not follow up, not have more questions, not think about it, just like turn it in as their assignment. But then they realize, oh, it's more, and there's different metaphors or analogies. Oh, it's more like a tutor or like a teaching assistant or your friend who knows a lot about what you're writing about or talking about. So it makes sense that it's used that way. You write another student in the class, and they pick a tool and they give a presentation on the tool and how they used it. Most of the students talked about how they used the tool in some other way. It was cool. There's 2 adult students who work full time, and they both talked about how they use the tool in their jobs. But this student really talked about how he used the tool to help him do a better presentation because he didn't understand like a technical part. So he asked him to explain it. He didn't know how to build this like chart. So I think he built it like in Canva, how to build the chart, right? So it's like, they say, oh, okay, it can help people, right? Do better work. So he's using it to do better work. And I joked at the end, I'm like, yeah, everyone accuses you guys of all being cheaters. And I was like, but there's a lot of thinking going on. These presentations are amazing. They're really reflective. And it's related. I'm sure this wasn't a coincidence, but Anthropic also turned out a research paper today about use of Anthropic. And more of their customers, their clients or businesses are more B2B, but they have some consumer use. And they said education usage, or at least educational tasks, surged from 9.3% to 12.4%, science from 6.3 to 7.2. They use a lot of coding, but they made this kind of also the observation about work. It says 40% of employees report using AI at work, up from 20% in 2023. So you're getting a lot of usage at order. You're starting to see some similar things. The one thing that they just pointed out, they didn't say it was alarming, but other people are like, okay, this is concerning. So with the use of Claude for tasks, because there's this big discussion of automation versus augmentation. All right. So their originally usage was 27% of people were using it for automation. That increased to 39%. So they're starting to see a lot of diverse kind of applications, they say, across education, science, and business. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of just automation. Now, the other thing that was in the study when I was reading it that people didn't pick up on, it said in regions where they have the highest usage or areas where they have the highest usage, those tended towards augmentation. So that makes me think, oh, and it's hard to draw a conclusion, right? But the thought that popped into my head is maybe as people get to know it better, right? And they think, okay, I can use this to augment me. Or maybe they discover there are still like errors and it's hard to have a human-free workflow. So sometimes when people try to automate and then they're like, okay, we need to put the humans in here still, at least for a while. So that could be part of the cause. But in a way, I was like, okay, that's good. The more it gets used, right? Because there is this big debate that the business users, that they're saying that 77% of business uses involve automation. So the businesses that are using this, their employees don't want to be automated, but the businesses want to be automated. And that's a concern that people have raised. And some people get frustrated and they say, oh, the businesses need to realize that they really need augmentation to be strong. And there's a lot going on, obviously, in the economy right now. And I think that's causes, in some ways, businesses to want to automate, right? Because they're very concerned. Even just tariffs, maybe think if I could offset some of the costs of the tariff or whatever else, right? Inflation, other parts of the economy. But this report does suggest that there's some reasons to be concerned about automation and the businesses that are racing to adopt this. They might have a little bit of automation in mind. I mean, for most businesses, labor is obviously one of the highest, if not the highest cost. It does suggest some concern. There's something in the OpenAI paper is really a lot more kind of just positive. Oh, it's getting better, but this points out the reality of it, but you also got to think about it. Anthropic also saying, look, people can automate because they can get more B2B that way, right? Like any company that can save. People say, oh, this is so expensive. Yeah, but if you're replacing some of your labor, then it's the same or less, probably less. So it's something we need to obviously be aware of. More and more people are talking about that. But yeah, really 2 of the biggest companies are starting to show a lot of what the usage is looking like on a broad scale.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it coincides really interestingly with a couple other things that are happening. So one was Demis Hassabis gave an interview, I think just like a day or 2 ago. And he was asked, what is the skill that future generations should really focus in on? What is the one thing? And he said, it's learning how to learn. And it reminded me, there was this quote, we used to use this all the time. Like I had this quote from presentations that I did 20 years ago. And it was Alvin Toffler. And it was where he said, The illiterate at the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And so I
Yeah.
just keep coming back to this idea that every single thing that we need to do in this moment are actually things we should have been doing for the last 20 years. And I
Right.
think when you haven't done those things, like I can't even tell you how much that quote was used in just less even the last 15 years, let's say. Learn, unlearn, relearn. Like it was posted everywhere. Yet clearly it's something that a lot of people are struggling with. But what's actually even more interesting, if you think about that, is that's also the number one use case people want for these AI tools. It was even interesting reading through the paper, looking at the kinds of things that people wanted tutoring and help with. And a lot of them were like life skills, right? With like financial literacy, how to meal prep. They were all life things that people just like, how do I do this in life? And it's funny because those are the exact things that are really missing from schools. So it's good to go through the list because it really tells you where people's minds are at. It tells you where people are struggling. So it's so interesting. Like we just have so many data points now. I feel like just even if we take just the pieces that we talked about in this podcast, we have so many data points now. But the other thing that this tied back to was really interesting. Somebody actually wrote a little like why I don't agree. So Dan Fitzpatrick, and if you haven't seen his Back to School AI Summit, I highly recommend checking it out. All the videos are posted for free on YouTube. He has a new book. It's just so many fantastic resources he curated together. But I did a keynote for him on agency and why agency matters in the age of AI.
Right.
He posted about it and Forbes, and he said agency is the new literacy was like the title.
Right.
So
Yeah,
somebody
that
wrote
was
this
awesome. I read that.
article
Yeah.
pushing back, and it's like we're still bound by the systems and structures and power structures by people. And when I listen to just the things that we talked about today from these reports, but then I hear somebody else, Sabba, and if you don't know who he is, he's the CEO of Google's DeepMind, a Nobel laureate. I mean, he's just one of the most like foremost thinkers on AI. When somebody like that comes along and says, hey, huge change is coming literally in the next decade, things are not going to look the way they do today. And you think decade is a long time, but just think back to the last 10 years flew by. But when somebody like that says you need to learn how to learn, that is, you need to take agency over your own situation. And so I just want to say for anybody who ever doubts, oh, but I can't do this because of this, that is where your AI tool is going to step in as your teammate to help you overcome whatever those barriers are. And I don't by any means want to say it's easy, but as soon as he wrote that, the first thing I thought of was the difference between my school experience in 2007, where I talk about how I graduated knowing absolutely nothing about emerging technologies. Like I was the person getting laid off. My life was so different back then compared to 2017 when I went back to do my doctorate, but I had so much exposure to, I could make a podcast, I can make a documentary. I didn't need my teachers, the power structures, higher education, school. I didn't need anything to change. You can all stay exactly the way you are. But I had the agency, and I knew I had the agency to go and create and make and do and make an impact in the way that I wanted to. So I just want to say that reading that made me wonder how many other people thought that I don't have the agency to do X. And that's really what we call that AI mindset, right? You have this idea. That's all you need to do is have the idea. You need to have identified the problem you want to solve. And then you bring in both AI and people to be able to figure out what comes next.
Yeah, a couple thoughts. One is like these companies have a lot of data on what people actually want to learn. Okay, so if you're an online course provider and you basically knew what everybody wanted to learn, and I don't mean like the old MOOC course or whatever, they can roll these out with AIs in any different ways, right? Exactly like what the demand is, right? As compared to schools know the kids really don't want to learn this stuff. And then they conclude that means they don't want to learn. It's no, they just want to learn, okay, like how to do my finances or get a loan or all these, like how to use a computer, right? So that's interesting. The second thing is it's like people are like the students are exercising their agency, right? They're deciding not to pay attention or whatever. It reminds me, somebody on LinkedIn posted, she's like, oh, when I do a keynote or a speech, I talk about why couldn't the high school just be completely different? Why is it the case that kids have to go to school all day? Maybe they could work part of the day. And she's like, finally, one person said, okay, that wouldn't be so bad. And I posted, I said, that's the status quo, the current system. And then nobody really got it. But my point is that the kids checked out half the time they're there, right? They're not really there. They're here, they're there, like anything else. I think we can see some evolution there. I just think people just need to think bigger. That's part of my big issue with all these cell phone bans is, okay, sure, maybe sometimes kids shouldn't use a cell phone in school. I'm not saying you should sit there and play on your phone during your chemistry class, but this is like sucking all the oxygen out of the air. And it's like governors involved in cell phone bans. It's like, why don't the governors get involved in how to prepare the kids for an AI world or even just to learn about their finances? Why is nobody involved in that? I posted about this on LinkedIn. It has more views than anything I've posted on LinkedIn. It's close to 80,000 views. This thing, I just think brain thought I had about cell phones and agency. And no, we need to give the kids agency over the phone, because when they leave school, they'll just have people who they're addicted to the phone. So we need to ban it at school. I was just making a broader point about how we can't just talk about this. They're bigger issues.
Yeah.
And that made a lot of people mad. In my class, I don't want them using the phone. That's not my point. But I think these questions it's all about agency, right? Because when they leave school, even if the school succeeds in banning the phone, it's irrelevant.
And I really wish more people would make the differentiation between phone and social media algorithms. Because I think if you started making algorithms the problem, that's what's causing it. That's what's causing it. Now you have a much stronger understanding of why a ban isn't I was telling somebody just in a workshop today, there's not going to be a yonder for AI tools. That's the big company that's why cell phone bans have gotten so much traction. These yonder pouches that they've created.
Right.
There's no yonder.
It's a whole industry behind this.
So that concept that's giving people some temporary relief now, I think is going to boomerang back at you and hit you so hard, because then you're going to be like, great, we never taught people how to self-regulate. We never taught people how to have agency over algorithms. And these are the baby steps that we miss. So when the technology evolves and becomes more advanced, we have a much, much harder time catching up. We were just talking right now about sources, right? Information seeking and learning is one of the top things that people are using these tools for. Yet no, information literacy, media literacy is at an all-time low, that people can't tell fact from fiction and whatnot. So now that you have an even bigger challenge here, because we never focused on the basics, now we're struggling on both ends, which ultimately just makes everybody's life much harder as well. And so I think you're right. And even in the governor point, California just started a workforce thing. And I feel like there are so many people, and I don't want to bring it down in any way, because I think it's great that you're getting together. But I just see too many people applauding it and not enough people being, why are you doing this 3 years late? And not only is it 3 years late, I always think back to if a random girl like me could do a dissertation in 2017 on this topic, where in the world were world leaders, government leaders, California, where were you in 2018, 2019, 2020, 21, 22, 23, 24, that now in 25. And so somebody actually posted today, they were like, oh, this is amazing. By 2025, they're going to have some recommendations. By 2026, they're going to launch a policy. By 2027, we'll be able to implement. And I just laugh. I was like, you realize by the time that hits your hands, we can have AGI. This us. And that's, I want to bring that back to agency as well, because there is this entitlement, I think, in society now, where people just wait for the government to do things. And I was like, I don't know what American history books you've been reading where you think the government has ever acted in the best interest of people. People have really advocated for themselves first. And so I think agency is, I just think more people need to be talking about it. More people need to be taking it back. More people need to be like, okay, we're going to figure this out in our community with our people. And that's the human part too, right? Getting people together, taking initiative. That is agency, and having your AI tools support you along the way, versus I'm waiting until 2027 for the state of California to release a work plan. I've never heard something so ridiculous before.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of big questions that are going to come up. Today, I said, the Department of Education, they took $500 million or something, and they're putting it all in charter schools. Okay, the charter school debate aside, right? It's okay, but what are they going to learn in the charter school? Because that's all up in the air now. Even in the past, there's a lot of Success Academy is very much, all right, you come, it's very strict. You come here 8 hours a day, and they seem pretty good at this drill method, and lots of discipline, and a high percentage of kids going to college. But what is that still okay? Even if that model was successful for however many years, is that model going to prepare kids for the future? I'm sure Alpha School will be trying to get some of these charters and stuff, right? But
they're going to blow up.
A friend of mine actually just quit his job to start an Alpha School. It's really spreading, but I'm just saying nobody's asking the big. I think it's hard, right? Because it's hard to answer these questions, right? And you can only get so far ahead of people. I mean, you have to school, you go to the parents, be like, hey, we're going to follow the Alpha School model. Half of them will leave, right? There's kind of these practical realities, but very few people, everyone's saying, basically going to have AGI or something like it, within a few years. And you call it what you want, define it as conscious or not, or whatever. They're saying 1,000 times more capable by 2030. You can just see the progression yourself. It's clearly starting even to build in code. The Replit Agent 2, a basic consumer product, can code on its own for 3 hours and build out entire workflows. And that's available to anybody. So imagine what OpenAI and Anthropic are using during the day, right? The world's going to change an awful lot. And yeah, the only way to do this, right, is you can't wait for a committee. There's an economist at George Mason, Tyler Cohen, and he's pretty influential. He's like Ethan Hawke, but he doesn't quite have that influence. But he was making an argument a lot of colleges are going to fail. And they asked him why. He's like, well, just think your average college. And I think he did this in the summer or last spring. He's like, in the fall, they're going to put together an AI committee. And the whole audience just starts laughing, right? And then he's like, they're going to consider it. They're going to debate amongst themselves. In the spring, they'll release a draft plan that will give people opportunities for feedback. And he goes through the whole process of what a committee would like involved in. They'll produce this document that is irrelevant, right? That by the time it's released, it
This is
won't
the
be
biggest
relevant.
thing.
And look, you could double that. You could triple the speed of that, and you'd still basically have the same problem.
Yeah.
It's really, people are going to really, they can't depend on anybody, whether it's the government or like the school. I've heard professors at MIT say MIT is like not reacting to this properly. Like they don't understand the significance of it, right? It's going to be challenging times, but the only way you're going to be prepared for whatever it is or be prepared to adapt is to have agency. Like I don't really see how it's possible to do it any other way, because even how it impacts different people is going to change. It's going to be different for different people. There's not going to be anybody to tell you how to do it, how to do it for yourself. There's not going to be anybody. Sometimes I say this person is an expert in education. Okay, but they're an expert in the way education worked for 30 years. And that's not to diminish that person. It's just like, no one has expertise in like how to respond to the whole world changing in 5 years in an unpredictable way. Everyone has ideas and people, you put them out there. I like listening to a lot of your ideas, right? But no one has this is 100%, right? Everyone's offering up their best ideas and discussing them, and different people's ideas are going to work for different people. If anyone just tells you this is 100%, if you do this, then like all your kids are going to be successful. We don't know.
Speaking of agency and speaking of not just sticking to an AI committee, because once upon a time that was great, but I think right now you have to move differently. Brandeis University, I hope I'm saying that correctly, just launched a major initiative. And I think this is such a great example of what it means to have agency and what it means to stay relevant as well in this time. So they called it Reinventing the Liberal Arts for the 21st Century. And they have this initiative, and it's basically called the Brandeis Plan to Reinvent the Liberal Arts. And it is not just, oh, we're doing a little curriculum map update or something like that. It is an entire redesign of what the academic and student experience looks like to be able to prepare kids for exactly what it is.
You have to think about it.
Yeah. So some of the core areas of what they have, it's a huge focus on career-ready skills. They have a deep integration of career prep into every single stage of the program. So they have a new curriculum that's built around skills that employers value, required internships or apprenticeships for all students, and then sustained ongoing career counseling and guidance from the moment they said students arrive on campus. They also have something else called the Second Transcript, which they developed in partnership with ETS, which is the Educational Testing Service. They're going to offer students a second transcript, and it's basically like an innovative document that verifies their competencies, their skills, that they've done through all of these practical experiences, internships, and all of these things, just to make that really clear to employers. And ETS is going to use its new AI-powered platform called Future Nav Compass to help students track these skills and map them to in-demand jobs. And one of the things that I just wanted to say about that in particular is one of the things that the workforce has talked about a lot, like LinkedIn has published so much on this in the last couple of years, and that's the rise of skills-based hiring. But one of the biggest problems employers had was, how do we know what these skills are, right? So obviously portfolios were a really big one, but of course not enough people did them. So the fact that they're creating this new platform and this second transcript concept, it's so clever. The entire thing is not just a random idea or like a PDF. It's backed by a $25 million investment from their board of trustees. So you can tell, and they have a new center they're calling the Center for Careers and Applied Liberal Arts to basically drive innovation in these areas. But above all, they said this is about breaking down silos. They want to unify their schools with the traditional liberal arts programs, giving their undergrads much better access to like professional pathways, hands-on learning, while keeping that academic foundation strong. So I was just like, they're not waiting for their state, because I don't want to say that states shouldn't take action. Of course they should. There's a time and place. We need laws. We need all these people getting together, but it's really a both and. You can't sit around waiting for these states and whatnot to come down with their plan, because it's going to be too late for you. What I see Brandeis doing, making partnerships with companies for their local community, for their group. I also want to say, we're seeing this a lot. Honestly, everywhere I'm going, I am seeing people have such high levels of agency. Like, I think, me and you worked on Desert Scenic. high levels of agency. They didn't work for some California task governor to come down and give them what to do. They are just probably one of my favorite examples, not only because they did the decision-making framework and everything all last year, but this year they've deployed Google Gemini to everybody. Their trainings are way more in depth. Their people are way more engaged and motivated. But we are seeing this across the country in so many places, people locally in their communities having agency, taking agency, and designing what they want while simultaneously waiting and looking for what is the larger landscape doing too.
Yeah, and it's ultimately those those experiments, right? That the larger landscape, those people, I was thinking about this when I was reading something, like the people who are involved now are the people who are going to have influence about what happens, right? Otherwise, like inevitably, that
True.
world's going to get shaped. It's going to move in one direction, right? Maybe not one, but it's going to move in like some major directions, for better or worse, right? And maybe not what you want. But if you just say styling, right, and you're kind of like no AI, or this is not a big deal, or you try to buy the yonder pouch, right? I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that line. That's so good. That's such a good way to express it. I'm going to steal that. Then you're not going to have a say. It's these leaders, right, that are getting out there. And the other thought, it's like, yeah, we should have been doing this before AI, right? Universities are already struggling, even before AI, with the connection to what kids were learning and spending a lot of money to learn, to the outcomes. I think is like kind of here in AI literacy week, right? And it's AI literacy was just, okay, what is AI and these kind of things, and a little bit about how it's going to kind of impact the world. And then people argued, right, on LinkedIn and places for hours, for months and years about what it should be. They weren't teaching anyone anything, right? They were just arguing amongst themselves. I'm like, just tell the kids something about AI, right? Call it that. But we're starting to see the use really increase. It's not going away. One company with 700 million users. You have universities trying different things. Some of them, they just partner with OpenAI or something like that. But then you have programs like Brandeis. You have centers being born. You have colleges of AI. It's not going anywhere. And, that awareness too, that is becoming part of AI literacy. When all these kids at college, okay, I would encourage my child to go to a college like Brandeis, right? AI literacy is starting to impact, like it's starting to be really important to your life choices, and to have agency, right? Or to be a good agent or use your agency in productive ways, right? You need knowledge. So that also ties back to that. But I was just feeling as we're finishing this, okay, like the world's making some progress, right? Spend a lot of time talking about, oh my gosh, people got to do something. And we meet people who are doing like a thing in a district or a school or like a company, right? But you didn't really feel like, and now I feel like, okay, everybody's not on the train, but more people are getting on the train and other people are now running towards the train. Oh, I should have started walking a while ago. Now I got to run to the train. So I think with this AI literacy, I think we're in a more positive place.
We are definitely in a more positive place. I think if there's one big sort of feeling or sentiment you get when you go places these days, it's that we're at a turning point where people are now like, okay, what are we doing about this? What are we doing? And it's one of those things that can be slow and then it's sudden. And now that it's sudden, we can all use this momentum to really gather together, to learn from best practices and really accelerate what comes next. As always, if you need any support in any of the work you are doing, feel free to reach out to us to learn more about programs and offerings and just what other people are doing if you're interested in learning more. If you have any topics you'd like us to cover, you can also say those as well. Till then, we will see you next week.
It's your turn to join the conversation by sharing what you enjoyed or what questions you have. In a world where time and attention are so valuable, thank you for choosing to listen and for being a part of our Designing Schools community. Leaving a review for the podcast helps others learn about the show, giving them the gift of knowledge and allowing this community to help create access and exposure to ideas and opportunities others may not even know exist.